Let's move into the program. Um, I met a guy named David Reed, as soon as I got into this business. I don't know what he was doing then, but I know what he was doing 10 years ago in April. He and his bride, Lucy Chabot Reed, were founding the Triton newspaper. And it is next month, correct? It'll be 10 years. And so over those 10 years, I'm quite sure that all of you have met David or Lucy. I don't know how you could miss them. We certainly see the efforts of their business every month, and we really appreciate it because they do a terrific job at that. But let me just tell you a bit about their backgrounds. Lucy was a reporter and editor in South Florida for more than 20 years. I didn't know that, including stints at the Sun Sentinel and the South Florida Business Journal. Over that time, she's written or edited more than, now I don't know if this is a checkable claim, 4,800 stories. We're going to check out whether that's a good, a lot of editing there, about yachting, yacht crew, and companies that support them. That's really terrific. She's a font of knowledge. A lot of times I'll pick up the phone and call Lucy when I've got a question, and I can tell you she's always got the answer. So certainly, use Lucy in that capacity. David serves as the Triton publisher. David's the mariner. I'll call him the mariner because I know Lucy a couple of years ago was learning how to sail, so I know that she didn't come from a mariner's background, but David did, and David spent a lot of time on boats, and that's why he can do what he does. But what David really does in this industry is he gives back. David gives back every day in this industry, and he's constantly thinking, correct, Mole? He's thinking in the shower, he's thinking when he's driving. He's thinking when he's driving Ken to school in the morning, and he's thinking when he's walking into my office because I know he's going to barrage me with something. But at any rate, very seriously, David has given tirelessly of himself. He was part of the Dirty Dozen or the 12 Apostles that sat at Blue Water some 8 years ago, 12 companies, and the whole concept of USSA got it going. He's recently left the USSA board because he was term limited. I had to throw him off, but that's okay. But he went on to the Marine Industry Association of South Florida board, where he's been doing a terrific job there. We really appreciate that. But just the other thing I want to say about Lucy and David is that they're good friends. They're good friends to everybody, and they give of themselves both personally as well as professionally. So I want to introduce now David and Lucy.
Thank you for showing up here early this morning. Our session, David came up with this topic and set me to work making it come alive. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that all worked. But this was David's idea, so I think it was a good one. I learned a lot doing it, and I hope you guys can take something away from all of this. So it's Speaking Captain, how to communicate with yacht captains more effectively and get better results. I want to start first by making sure that we are on the same page. So I want to ask you guys what you think, what you want to get out of the session. So I want to let me hear from you, and we'll jot a few things down, and we'll make sure that we address that stuff as we go through. We want to keep it to our regular time. So what do you hope to get knowing only that? What not to say. Great. Actually, I should say. Anybody else? That's a good one. I think they want to stay incognito if they are here. Seriously, are there any captains that work full-time as captains? No. Hi. Oh, that's right. We do have a captain. I'm sorry. Glenn is here. But he does other stuff, too. He's also a very successful business guy. So, Derek. Yes, please. Yeah, but it's not probably, right?
But really, how do you get to what they really need?
How to find out what they need?
Find out what they really need.
Okay.
Really, because I don't think they often, may or may not be comfortable with actually telling what they need.
Okay. Now. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, I don't know if I can answer that question for you, but we'll try. Anybody else? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, I'd like to find out where they got the information they already have from. The bit that I may disagree with.
Okay. So we want to find out where they're getting their information from. Find out their sources? Okay. Hey, 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 hey. Vicki. Okay, that one we can answer. When you say get to them, what do you mean? So how to reach them, how to interact with them. Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Go ahead.
How to find the perfect timing? How to? Okay. How about best time to approach? All right. Anybody else before I run out of paper? Yes.
Kind of dovetail with that, but knowing their schedules and that'll alleviate some time to be able to communicate with them.
Okay. Knowing their schedules. Whoops. All right. So if we address all of these, or at least some of them, I'm not sure about the ego one, well, we will have had a successful session, right? All right. So we are, what we did was we started, this was, like I said, David's idea. We got 10 captains, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't, to take this DISC assessment. Now, it's similar to the, what's the other one called? Briggs-Myers. It's similar to that, but the DISC is the one that we're familiar with. We've used it with our company in doing some hiring and to help our sales staff. So we were familiar with it, and we worked with the guy who does it. So we wrangled these 10 captains to take the personality test to see if any patterns emerged from these captains that we could then extrapolate and say, here's how to do this. And they did. So we're going to learn a little bit about the DISC first, and then we'll talk about captains more specifically. And then Dave is going to take over and talk about how to interact with them, communicate, and sell to them better. So the DISC personality assessment kind of starts with a general overview. So, okay, so DISC is broken up into DI, C, and S, or S and C. Sorry, we're going to go in a circle. And it's separated in these quadrants. So if you look at this horizontal line and go up, D's and I's tend to be more outgoing people. S and C tend to be more reserved. So when you take this test, it asks you a lot of questions about how you might handle a certain situation, what would you say, how would you do this, and how would you do that. And based on your answers, it can tell you, and it's only for you, but it tells you if you're more outgoing or more reserved. We all have all four of these types in us. Nobody is any one thing. But we usually have a dominant style. And knowing that helps us figure out mostly how to communicate. But when you know it about yourself, it teaches you how to interact with other people more effectively as well. But since we're not doing you guys how to interact with captains, we've done captains, so we're going to flip this around a little bit. So D is dominant and direct. I is inspiring and interactive. S, supportive and steady. C, cautious and careful. And if you think about it, I talked about the outgoing and reserved. This side, if you divide them this way, the D and the C are task-oriented. And to the right are more people-oriented. So you'll see as we go through how some of these interact, I guess. And so keep in mind that we're not all one thing. We all have all of these things in us, but we are dominant in one thing. So the important thing to remember when we figure out how all of this is we're going to find out the natural style of captains. and that is how they are, how they're born, how they're programmed, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to figure out how they act in their role. And that's more of an adaptive style. So how we are, all of us, like I said, we all have 4 styles, and we all exhibit the dominant, inspiring, supportive, or cautious behavior at any time in any situation. But most of us tend to have some pattern to the behavior consistent with one of the categories. So most of us, about 80%, register high in 2 types, and that was true for captains as well. Only 5% are high in 1 type. And so this information is powerful when we consider it in relation to ourselves, meaning that someone that you talk to is more or less dominant or supportive or cautious than you are. So it's important to kind of try to figure out who you are as well in that mix. So the really cool thing when we did the disc with the captains was that they do have patterns. And they were, without exception, either dominant D with a C or CD. So all were above average in the dominant and direct quadrant, which makes perfect sense if you think about it. All were above average in C, cautious and careful, which almost seems opposite. About half showed S, the supportive, steady, the people-oriented, reserved kind of spot, as a secondary style, which was interesting to see. And all of them were below average in I, which is the outgoing, interactive, people-oriented. And it's also interesting to know that salespeople are I's, right? Mm-hmm. Salespeople tend to be I's. So they are the exact opposite of what captains are. Well, not exact opposite, I'm sorry. So they're, here's what some of the graphics look like. This is a captain. His style showed up as D, C. So it's dominant in C with a strong style in C. I'm sorry, it's dominant in D with a strong supportive secondary style of C. And then so the natural style for that captain, that's how somebody thinks, how somebody feels. It represents who they are rather than what they do. And they're least likely to change. So this guy, very off the charts with the D, and almost as high with C. The adaptive style is the way that we act or behave in a certain situation. It's what we've come to understand how we need to react and behave in the work environment or in a relationship. And obviously your behaviors can change depending on the job, the environment. You know, you may meet a captain now who's a D with a C, and then he has a different kind of owner, and he needs to behave differently, so his adaptive style is going to change a little bit. So half of our captains were Ds with that C adaptive trait. The other half were C with the dominant C with a D. So even though they're naturally reserved, they have adapted to be more aggressive and direct in their working environment, likely because of the boss or the circumstances, like I mentioned. And this captain also has a strong presence of S. But the dominant is C, which is cautious, controlled. A task-oriented person that is more reserved is a C person. Let me look at that chart again. And this was a CD. But it was just interesting to see how they all showed up. And even though this person's natural style is more of the cautious type, I mean, the D is almost as high in their natural style. And their secondary style is almost equal as well. So when we look at this quadrant again, oh, I missed it, sorry. There. Remember that it's the D's and the C's tend to be task-oriented people. So almost without fail, you can say that that's what a captain is. You're going to have to figure out if the captain you're talking to is more cautious and reserved or more outgoing and direct. So let's see. trying to speed this up a little bit and not read everything I have. So let's look at how to identify the styles, because that's really what you guys want to know more about. And hopefully we'll answer some of those questions. So how to identify the styles? Let's talk about the Ds first. Oh, this,
Do you wanna
yeah,
hand that
this is, we've got this handout for you, so you don't have to write all this down.
Two-sided, right?
Yeah. So the Ds, how to identify them when you have an interaction with them. They tend to be decisive. They're outgoing people, and they tend to move faster, they speak faster, and they decide faster. They speak a little louder than normal people, I guess, or other people, or maybe you could even consider that louder than you. So they're more dominant than you. And they often show their thoughts and feelings outwardly and intensely. They're dominant and direct, they're determined, decisive, tough, and they can be seen as impatient. They're strong-willed, competitive and demanding, and they're independent and self-confident. When they're stressed or uncomfortable in a situation, they can be aggressive and blunt. They can be self-centered and overbearing. It can be. Well, it depends. And this is, yeah, well, we'll talk about the dangers of labeling in a second, but yeah. When we look at the Cs, the other dominant captain trait, you'll remember that circular, oh, thank you. Remember that circular bit.
Oh, it's on. It was on. I heard that part. Was that a D trait coming out there? Or?
All right, so our Cs, if you remember that circle, they're all task-oriented Ds and Cs, but the Cs are on the lower half. They're more reserved. So as reserved people tend to move slower. They observe and evaluate and analyze situations before they make a decision. Comparing that to the more outgoing Ds, they make decisions faster. So the Cs, again, the reserved, more task-oriented people, they have softer voices, and they keep their thoughts and feelings private, unless they're really pressed. But they are task-oriented, so in that regard, they're cautious and careful. They're calculating. See all these C words to help us remember that. They're consistent and concerned. They're precise and exact. They like to follow the rules. They're logical, formal, and disciplined. When they're stressed or uncomfortable, they can get withdrawn and even shy. They get stuck on the details sometimes at the risk of the bigger picture. They're unwilling to take risks, and they likely won't express an opinion unless you really ask them about it. We're going to briefly go through the I and the S, only because it's interesting for you to have that information to see where you fall. So the I's, these are outgoing people, more people-oriented people. They're inspiring and interactive. Again, we're using the I words to try to help that stick. They're influencers, they're interested in others, and they're involved. They're talkers, they're sociable, enthusiastic, and energetic. And when they're stressed or uncomfortable, they can be frantic and careless and even indiscreet. They can also be hasty, losing all sense of time. The S's, remember that half of our captains showed up with an S as a secondary or adaptive trait. They're reserved, people-oriented people. They're supportive and steady. They're stable. They prefer the status quo, and they're sensitive. They're calm and patient. They're a good listener and trustworthy. And when they're stressed or uncomfortable, they can be stubborn and resistant to new ideas. They will not actively seek change. So we have a little exercise.
Okay,
What do you
this is
think?
where Michael was trying to get working yesterday, and we got it working
Got it
today.
working for us. So if you look at the information that you know with the chart in front of you, what do you think you are? Where do you think you fall in that? Now, a lot of people want to say that they're nice and they're soft-spoken, but be honest with yourself. No one needs to know. Once you pick your letter, how does this work?
ideally, you can go to pollev.com/USSA, and there'll
Want to do
be
this with your phone?
a little
We're going to do a
button that
little
you can
poll of the
push
room.
live, and it'll show up as we go.
Or you can text.
Or you
Or
can
text.
text it.
And the phone number that you'd be texting to, don't use the word code. The phone number would be 22333, and then whether you choose DIS will be the number.
Come on, Derek.
Get
Get
your
your
phone
phone out.
Oh,
Did
okay.
you vote?
He's doing it. Did you vote? Yeah, so you can text to 22333, pick your letter. Oh, we have one respond. It's going to pop up right here. Oh, you know
Oh,
what?
you
We
can't
can't
see on
it.
that
Do
side.
you want to go sit over there and see if you can see it? Is it on that computer?
Yeah.
So this should pop up. Still working on it?
Yeah, they're still coming in.
Okay. Can you read the I numbers?
No, we have to take it offline to see it.
Oh, okay.
I'll try to log in on.
But salespeople tend to be I's, so that makes perfect sense. I wish I could see the number. I hope it's not. I mean, it's over 10, right? All right, so remember what you wrote down. If you can write it on a piece of paper and circle it or something, because we're going to have another exercise in a minute. But it's important for you to remember which one you think you are. Okay, so when we're talking to, I'm going to stop it here. Is everybody who wanted to do it, do it?
I think
All
so.
right. So when you're talking to people, we've identified the 4 different styles. So the first thing you want to do is you ask yourself, is this person more task-oriented or more people-oriented? And if you're dealing with yacht captains, it's going to be pretty obvious that they're task-oriented. So you probably don't want to spend a lot of time being their buddy, touching them. They don't like that. Glenn's looking at me like, you don't know. So that part's pretty easy based on the research that we've done. But you also want to know, is this person more outgoing or reserved? And again, we go back to that circle where the D's and the C's are task-oriented. You want to know kind of where they fall in that. So spend a minute observing them if you can before you approach them if you have that opportunity. Or chat about something other than business, just to see if they're more outgoing or more reserved. You'll get a sense, you'll hear their voice tone. You'll get a sense if they're fast or slow. And they're not going to be fast or slow. They're going to be somewhere in there. And it's best to know where they fall on that spectrum in relation to you. And that's going to help your communication with them. And at the end of the day, you just have to guess. I mean, none of us are experts in this stuff. So that gives you a starting point, and then you can adjust as you get more information. Okay, so we're going to have another exercise. You want to take control of it?
Okay.
Just to take a break and talk to somebody.
All right, we're going to incorporate a little bit of what we did yesterday. So we'd like you to find somebody you don't know and go and practice your nameplate, your globe, your house. Was it a person, a wrench, plus or minus, and golf clubs? Golf bag? Telescope. All right. We'd like you to practice that again and try and figure out what the person is that you're talking to, how they fit, whether DIS or C.
All right, just a couple of minutes.
Just a couple of minutes here. Come on, Mole. There you go.
Can you ask,
Okay.
please ask the person you're talking to what they think you are?
No, just what.
It's interesting because we were just saying that for work, I'm a very bubbly, demanding, out there and cautious. But in my personal life, I'm very shy.
Withdrawn, yeah.
Introverted, and I like on my days off.
Okay, does everybody get their disc feedback?
It really is. It was fun exercise. Okay, now
Okay,
we're going.
so the question asked now, you've exchanged cards, is what's the best way for me to communicate with you?
All right, sales guys, wrap it up.
Huh? There you go.
Wrap it up. We got a little bit more to do. I know, it's really awesome when you start thinking about this stuff.
Want to go on to the next screen? Go on to the next
Yeah.
screen. All right, we're back to poll everywhere. What we'd like to do is to find out if you were right or wrong, if the person was able to ascertain what your...
Okay, we're going back to poll everywhere, so pollev.com.
Go to a
or
website.
you
Go
can
to a
just do a
website.
text.
Just web browser.
And were you right? And the person you just spoke to, what they thought you were they the same? Isn't that funny? So part of that is who you really are and how you present when you're interacting with other
Safari,
people.
right?
So
Okay,
text
so up at the top there.
22333. And
You
were
wanna
you
be able to
right,
type-
yes or no?
Type in there. Now type in pollev.com.
So did everybody talk to
EV.
somebody they didn't know? Awesome, you guys are great.
V is in Victor.
So one of the other things, I'm going to move on from here, Michael, if that's all right. Okay. So knowing what we know is only a little bit, and there are some dangers with that. And one is labeling people. So we don't want to say, Lucy's a D. I am, but you don't want to call me a D.
She's got a big D over her head. Trust me. She communicates with captains very well because of this process. She's had 120 luncheons in this
Yeah.
process.
It's true. Those captain's lunches are fantastic, and I hadn't thought about it until I started researching this a little bit more. But David's right. I think that they communicate with me well, even though I'm a female in a male-dominated world of captains. We have great rapport in those lunches, and they really open up, and you can see that reflected in the stories that we write. But anyway, careful not to label. Captain, you might say Captain Brown's a dominant person. That's a label. Instead, think in your mind that he's got dominant behavior, because you can address that. If you say he's a dominant person, you immediately act some way or think something about that. But if you say the captain has dominant behaviors or seems to have a dominant perspective, then you can take that and use what you know about this disc and what you know about yourself and where you fall in there. If we simply observe that this is a dominant perspective, we change our approach, and you can better communicate with them. So the second danger is assuming that you know everything about the person simply because you think you know the model, the DISC model. And it's just one part of a person, like you guys were talking about yesterday with Dale Carnegie. The important part also is their educational background, their culture, their family, their relationship history, whether they're married, divorced, all of that stuff, and where they've been in their lives and what they've done. So knowing their DISC doesn't mean you know them, it just means you have an idea how to approach them and how to communicate with them. So we're going to go back. If you flip the handout over, oops, I thought I put that back in there. To flip the handout over, you're going to see, oh, actually, that's David's part. That's the communicating part. We're going to look at some behaviors.
Keep going. Go ahead.
Some behaviors of D captains. We went over this, so we're going to go through this kind of quickly just so David can get on with his part. They're outgoing. They often appear in a hurry. They're direct, so they say what they think. They're impatient, so they can be blunt. Don't take that personally. They're self-confident, so they speak in a loud tone. They're looking at the big picture, so they want to know what's the bottom line. And yeah, sometimes that's money, but it's also when can you do it, and how is it going to get finished, and where. So they want the bottom line. And they're independent. So they talk about themselves and their goals, but also the results that they want. They're task-oriented on what they're dealing with. Some behaviors of C captains, the C dominant captains. They're reserved, a little more reserved, so they move more slowly. They often appear quiet, even timid, and they're going to talk in a softer tone. They're private, so they keep their thoughts and feelings to themselves. They focus on the details, so they're going to ask you a lot of questions. They're calculating and precise, so it's likely that they've studied any documentation that you left for them, including all the specifications. So they're going to ask you some specific questions, so they want you to know. And even though they're reserved, they're also task-oriented, so they're going to observe and evaluate and analyze stuff before making a decision. And because they do that, they can be critical. But that's not based on opinions. It's more based on the facts that they have at hand. So they want to talk about facts and analysis. So the more data you give your sea captains, the better for them. All right, so how do you communicate with captains? Knowing what you know about the DISC model, and knowing what you know from our research that most captains are task-oriented. Many of them are outgoing, some are reserved, half of them are reserved, half of them are outgoing, or somewhere on that spectrum. Think about how you've communicated with them, or how you've directed your employees to communicate with them. Do you think that a lot of people think that because you're a captain, you would have a better inroads in sales or in product discussions?
One of the things I learned with Lucy and being a D and I'm an S is that you got to make her think it's her idea as you're doing it. So
I don't think I want to sit up here.
and you probably have the same results with a captain, is if you can drop an idea and run, don't walk. Yes, there you go. We've done this a few times, and I think that's why we're standing here today. So, and then we're almost at the end of our time here, actually.
Yeah.
Why don't we go up to the board here,
Okay.
and we'll just make sure that we're missing anything big. Needs lots of supporting information. Ken, to your question earlier, when you think a captain has the wrong information, what's the best way to deal with them?
Well, let's see, Captain.
What's that? Exactly, right? You don't want to argue with them at that point and reinforce the bad decision. You want to be able to bring them back and ask them if you can present some information to them at a later date. We'll concentrate on the details, takes times. Take their time, avoid risks, and follow the rules.
So factors that motivate the buying decision. D, need a sense of achievement. They want to be quick and easy about making a buying decision. And they want to feel like they're the pioneer, like they're doing something new and different and better than other people are doing. So if you've got some kind of innovative technology, that's really helpful. That's a selling point for a D captain. For Cs, they need to be logical. They want all their information. Give it to them. Give them the cold, hard facts, all that data that you think most people aren't going to read. Your C captains will read it and use it. They want comparisons and want to be able to study any results that you give them. Remember, our C captains make decisions more slowly, so give them the time to look over all the information that you give them. So on the back of the handout is, in that quadrant is now how to communicate with captains. And so there's 4 quadrants. We're going to focus on C and D. We're going to wrap it up here a little bit. So with D captains, you want to get to the point. Don't waste their time. Not that it's wasting time, but a lot of times you want to get into the information slowly. Don't waste your time. Get to the point. Provide direct answers. If you don't know something, tell them you don't know, and then you'll find out. They can tell when you're not being truthful. Stick to the business. Concentrate on the subject. They lose interest quickly if your conversation turns to something off target. Use a results-oriented approach. Give them the bottom line. Tell them how they're going to get done what they want to get done. Identify opportunities and challenges, which allow them to be the pioneer, which allows them to be the trendsetter, and give them alternatives. Ensure that they win. They like to win. Give them immediate feedback. These aren't, they're not making decisions slowly. Once you walk away and tell them you'll come back tomorrow with information they've forgotten all about you. Act quickly, because he's making this decision fast, and let him talk. You listen. They enjoy brief conversations about ideas and concepts, and debate is okay. They don't mind that. Your Cs, not so much. What not to do with your Ds. Don't go into all the details and give them too much information. Don't try to control the conversation. Don't talk too much. Don't be emotional. And don't make physical contact with your D captains. How to communicate with your C captains. Be thorough. Use data and facts. Examine the argument from all sides. They don't want to debate, but they want to discuss. If you disagree with something that they've said, Ken, like you talked about this earlier, don't debate with them. Do it and give them more facts, not opinions. Listen carefully. Avoid new solutions, because these are not your risk takers. Answer questions calmly and carefully, and slow down. What not to do with your sea captains. Don't move too fast. Don't spend time on small talk. Are still task-oriented people. Don't stand too close. They're not people-oriented, they're task-oriented, remember. Don't debate. Don't lose patience answering all their questions. Be patient and calm. Don't withhold any information. And don't expect a decision right away. So that's an interesting, you have to really decide if they are outgoing or reserved. And that's going to let you know if they're going to make a decision now or tomorrow or next week or next season. And that's going to help you figure out what not to get discouraged over. All right, those are the motivating the buying decisions, and that's pretty much it.
The disc is available. There's a free one that's like 5 questions, and I think it was $29 to do one individually if you want to do it yourself.
Yeah, we bought a group of them, and it was as little as $30 a piece. All
Any other
right.
questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
They brought something up here, but they're not sharing it with us. We don't know what.
Well, we can share them.
Okay.
As you know, the Triton's turning 10 years old, and we just have some little goodies for the people who were brave enough to talk a little bit. So that includes Karen, just a little coffee mug.
Very good.
Gene always asks good questions. Thank you. You're welcome.